Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. After the presentations, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. To ask a question at that time, you may press star 1. This conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the conference over to Ms. Melissa Lake Spencer. Ma'am, you may begin.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the National Long-Term Care Ombudsman Resource Center, I'd like to welcome you to our call for volunteer coordinators titled Volunteer Evaluations, a Tool for Retention. This call will be recorded and available along with the handouts and other resources on the center's website, www.ltcombudsman.org. I'd like to thank you all for taking time out of your very busy day to join us for this call. The Ombudsman program across the country is blessed with excellent and dedicated volunteers. This is a common theme I hear when I talk with volunteer coordinators. But they begin to question, how can we keep these volunteers and keep them engaged with the program? It is rare to meet someone who enjoys evaluations, either giving them or receiving them. However, evaluations can be used as a tool to improve communication, improve job performance, reward a job well done, or motivate people. Ombudsmen have many tasks to do each day. When you add the job of volunteer coordinator to that list, it's almost overwhelming. Add to this the financial cuts facing most programs today, and we're faced with even more challenges. Most ombudsmen do not feel like they have the time for evaluating volunteers. Our speakers today are going to talk about how evaluations can improve the quality of your volunteer program and help you to better utilize your resources. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers today. We have Mary Fogg, a regional ombudsman and volunteer coordinator from Washington State, and we also have Marie Fry, a regional ombudsman and volunteer coordinator from New York. We have both sides of the country represented on our call today. I'll let Mary and Marie tell you a little bit more about their programs, and we'll have a chance for questions and answers at the end of their presentations. So with that, I'm going to turn the call over to Mary Fogg.
Well, hello, everyone, and I wouldn't want my boss to think that I was saying I was the regional ombudsman. I'm a staff ombudsman and volunteer coordinator in King County, Washington. We have 13 regions in the state of Washington that are all operated through nonprofits, so that we are not in a situation where we can come to blows with DSHS or advocate for our residents and be separate entities. In our program, we have about 7 staff, half of which are three-quarter time, and 80 volunteers. I believe that in terms of evaluations, in terms of tools, that it all becomes with an intensive screening process that we do prior to even accepting someone into training. We spend at least 2.5 hours or longer with each potential volunteer doing a lot of visitation and finding out where that person is really coming from prior to even starting the process of evaluation. The tools that we use are job description for volunteers, which should be in the packet. We track our months that individuals send in their reports and monthly meetings that are attended. This is very important for us in terms of an evaluation tool, just simply making sure that the administrative ombudsman knows who sent in a report and if a monthly meeting has been attended that month, because that is part of our requirements to maintain your certification, that you have 9 monthly meetings and send in your report every month. I might add that we have 42 opportunities for our volunteers to attend a monthly meeting throughout our county, which is quite large, and we have 80 volunteers to cover 20,000 individuals residing in long-term care in the King County area. We, as part of our evaluation, we do a 6-month check-in and a volunteer satisfaction survey. And I think what is one of the things that is the most beneficial is that the staff assigned to that particular volunteer does their monthly report on NORS and gives them a real good picture of where the volunteers are in terms of their cases and any of the consultations that they have provided. Melissa asked us to talk about our processes, and I'm sure as most of you, we have a regular topic, well, perhaps not, a regular topic at our monthly staff meetings to discuss what we call volunteer rescue. Volunteers also that may need to be eased out in the progress of our new volunteers. So we make that a vital part of every monthly staff meeting. Our support staff does a tremendous amount of ongoing support. We consider volunteers job one. At the end of the year, we have volunteer meetings for all of our ombudsmen to discuss closing out cases. And I, as a volunteer coordinator, which is part-time, and I'm a full part-time staff ombudsman as well, makes an informal process to call volunteers, especially if I get it in the wind that they're having some difficulties. And I just call and see how things are going, since I was the first point person that they met in the process to become an ombudsman with us. Some of the advantages of the processes that we use are that I say the cons are that it's time-consuming and requires a lot of work for staff to track the progress of assigned volunteers. And on the negative side, we've made a real effort to determine that we can't support those volunteers who are eating up time and taking up valuable resources. I'm sure many of you have residents that are frequent callers, and we have volunteer ombudsmen who are also frequent callers and never seem to quite catch the role and need a lot of hand-holding and support. And we provide that as much as feasible, and then start evaluating whether or not that individual needs some retraining or whether or not it might not be the right role for them. Our volunteers have responded to evaluations in many varied ways. What we do when we have an issue or there's been an issue brought up by a facility about a volunteer, we meet with the regional ombudsman, the assigned staff ombudsman, and myself to explain the role and have a meeting about how's it going. But we do that in our offices, making it more of a formal process rather than informal. One of the other reasons that we find that volunteers are responding to the evaluation is that they now know we're tracking reports in their meeting attendance over the last year, and that's made everyone feel like, oh, I need to get it in. I'm being, there's a report card, even though it's not an A, B, C, D type of report card, but we refer to it as the report card. The most positive outcome of our evaluations is we emphasize the value of the volunteers' work and the positive impact they're having for residents. And I still question how evaluations impact retention. As I stated above, we can't continue to support volunteers who are taking up scarce resources, but we find that from time to time, ombudsmen who are not making the grade, if I may say that, the evaluations help them bow out gracefully. It also is an opportunity for the ombudsmen that are being successful to feel good about the work that they've done. Melissa, did you want me to go on to the retention tips?
Yes, go right ahead.
Go right ahead. What we have is a formal process for leave of absence, and after 6 months, our volunteers must retake the training because we feel like they've been away from it, the job long enough, and to really check in on their commitment. We do a once-yearly refresher course for all ombudsmen. And as I mentioned before, there are many monthly meetings to choose from. And the first hour is spent on a presentation by staff on relevant topics. And some examples are grief and loss, legislative agendas. One of the things that I think is very important in long-term care is falls prevention. We model neutrality in the ombudsman role. We have presentations on leading presentations in your facilities, which enables the volunteer to feel comfortable about doing presentations when the staff isn't always able to get out to all of our facilities to do a resident rights presentation or something of that nature. We focus on communicating with cognitively impaired persons, and this year one of our primary focuses will be cultural awareness and multicultural sensitivity. We feel that all the volunteer meetings develop a real esprit de corps, and in addition to the refresher, the monthly meetings, which are split between case discussions and these topics, we have volunteer appreciation luncheon, a summer picnic, and a holiday party, which I think are pretty typical across the country. But we really put a lot of focus and energy into bringing all of the volunteers together under one roof, giving them a time to socialize, and they build relationships. And sometimes we'll say, hey, I've got this case, can you help me on that? And there's a tremendous amount of networking that occurs. Melissa, did you have any other questions prior to Marie taking over?
No, thank you very much, Mary, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Marie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marie Fry. I'm from upstate New York. Our program is housed at Lifespan of Greater Rochester, which is a not-for-profit in Monroe County. Our program currently oversees 6 counties, and we have 124 amazing volunteers. Our program has 3 assistant coordinators, one who oversees 3 counties, one who oversees 2, and another one who assists me in Monroe County, which is the bigger county in our program. We also have an administrative assistant who is just a very big help to our program. With regard to our volunteer evaluation, some of the tools that we use is very similar to Mary in that we do an extensive interview process where we ask for 2 references, and we actually follow up with that, and we find that this process, the interviewing process, really helps to weed out prospective volunteers and also perhaps redirect them to an area, a more appropriate volunteer opportunity for them. We also have a 6-month evaluation after our 36-hour training, as well as an annual program evaluation to our volunteers. We actually currently visit each of our volunteers at their facilities on an annual basis. What we do is we set up an evaluation time. We don't really call it an evaluation. We basically state it's an opportunity for us to visit with them at their facility, and we actually begin that process around September, and prior to meeting them, we have a self-evaluation form that we mail out to the volunteers, and at that point we visit them at their facilities, and it's an opportunity not only to see them in action but also to meet administrators, to meet the staff, and after we visit with them at their facilities, we really try to go and have coffee. If time is an issue, we meet with them. We set up an area, and we actually go over the evaluations, and we find that the self-evaluations are a wonderful tool that open up conversation. It appears that the volunteer is their worst critic. Actually, after the evaluations, we mail a thank you letter, and we try very hard to include like a positive observation that we've noticed. some of the pros and cons of this process of the evaluation is the pro is it allows the coordinators to observe their volunteers and see them in action, and also to tour facilities, because oftentimes, with the demands of the program, it's hard to get out to the facilities, and you really get a sense of a facility when you're there touring with your volunteers. And it also gives us an opportunity to share with the administrator the philosophy of our program and the fact that, we pretty much have an attitude that we're in this together. We want to help them make it right for the resident, and that we're not their regulators. We want to work with them to make it right for the volunteers. We have found that the one-on-one time that we spent during these evaluations really opens up the doors to communications with our volunteers. It pretty much provides a personal touch to the demands of their volunteer experience. The evaluations also are another tool that provides conversation with regard to in-service topics. If we see an area that we think our volunteers need improvement in, then we will have in-services with regard to that. It's interesting because the volunteers really enjoy introducing us to their facility, to the administrators, to the staff. It's like they're showing us off. They perceive us as their boss. Well, this is my boss, and they're coming out and they're watching us. How do the volunteers respond to the evaluations? I believe that initially the volunteers were intimidated and felt that we did not trust their skills. They felt that we were actually questioning their abilities, and they saw this as a real negative piece of our program. However, over time, I believe the evaluations have really proved to build relationships, an opportunity to build relationships, as well as an educational time for both the volunteer and the coordinator. What has been the most positive outcome to the evaluation? I truly think that educational opportunities, conversations during the evaluations bring up in-service topics like I had previously said, and also relationships building with the coordinator as well as with the volunteer. How do evaluations impact retention? As a program, we have found the one-on-one time spent with the volunteer during the evaluation process has definitely proved to open communication and build relationships. There's a personal touch to this approach. It models that we're not just a program, but that we're a group of people that sincerely care for our volunteers. And it's very interesting because I just got a card today, a Christmas card, and it really touched my heart in that the volunteer said, when I call for assistance, it's like I'm calling a friend. And I think that says a whole lot for the impact that we're making with these volunteers. The volunteers are proud to be part of a program that impacts the lives of our elders. The fact that we take the time to meet with them individually, I believe, illustrates that we value their dedication and involvement with our program. With regard to our retention tips and tools that we use, I would have to say that, constant support from staff. We also host a summer picnic for volunteers and their spouses. We host a winter appreciation luncheon for volunteers, and we honor them with years of service with a certificate. We invite volunteers to attend any portion of our 36-hour training as a refresher. Our in-services consist of guest speakers who are experts in their fields. All 6 counties provide the same in-service, allowing volunteers to attend any county if they have to miss theirs. We provide quarterly newsletters providing volunteers with current events, important information, case samples, facility updates, etc. Each volunteer receives a report packet at the beginning every year, which includes self-addressed envelopes, stamps, business cards, brochures, and report forms. We also host a small coffee in Monroe County. It's the larger county in our program, and it was the request of the volunteers They felt that the smaller group allowed them better time to establish relationships, and they felt more comfortable asking questions in a smaller group, and so we provide that. Our administrative assistant is responsible for monthly reports. She provides constant support and assistance with the reporting process. She obtains the report information and allows monthly reports to be taken over the phone, which we tend not to advertise on a regular basis, but we do have a few individuals that prefer that, so we really try very hard to accommodate. After the 36-hour training, we also have what's called a mentoring portion for our volunteers, where they actually go out with a veteran ombudsman and they mentor them to actually see what it is like, what's entailed in the ombudsman work. Another thing that we do is when we have one of our volunteers that, approach us and say that they're thinking about retiring, we offer alternatives. We obviously seek out, is it a health reason? Are they burned out? And we have established what's called a specialist position, where an individual is not assigned to a specific facility. However, if we do not have coverage or the volunteer ombudsman is sick in that facility, a specialist will cover those facilities in those events. Or if we have a volunteer that's sick or on vacation, those specialists will cover the facility. In some of our challenging facilities, unfortunately, we do have them in our county. We actually have coverage from our coordinators who are a bit more experienced, and we try very hard to incorporate 2 volunteer ombudsmen in the more challenging facilities. Our hope for 210, with the permission of our speakers, is we will begin to tape our speakers. In the event that our volunteers are unable to attend an in-service, they will be able to actually view it. And at the end of the year, if we have extra money, what we do is we hand out gas cards. And our volunteers really appreciate that sort of gift at the end of the year. So that is what our program does with regard to retention tips.
That's great. I'd like to add that we will take our reports by carrier pigeon over the phone any way we can get them.
Yeah.
And so I can really appreciate what you're saying on that. This is Mary speaking. And instead of specialists, we use emeritus as our classification for volunteers that have decided that they don't want to visit facilities but still want to remain a part of our volunteer force.
And what was that, Mary? What do you call them?
We call them emeritus.
Okay.
And that gives them it's a term that has a certain prestige associated with it. And people still, they just feel like they're a part of the program and they're being recognized.
Right.
We don't offer emeritus status to every one of our volunteers that leaves us. We're selective, and so they know that they're a select group. And we have a luncheon for the emeritus folks once a year as well. As you were speaking, I was thinking, oh, yeah, we do that. Oh, yeah, we do that. I'm in a situation where we have a volunteer who puts out our quarterly newsletter, and I send out what we call the monthly missive with information that's pertinent to the Ombudsman program, as well as the schedule of activities at the beginning of every month.
That's great.
Okay. Thank you both for your presentations. There was a lot of great information. Do we have any questions?
If you would like to ask a question, please press star 1. You will be prompted to record your name. To withdraw that request, you may press star 2. Once again, to ask a question, you may press star 1 on your touch-tone phone.
While we're waiting, Mary, could you tell us a little bit about your volunteer rescue?
So that is an offshoot of our meetings on our monthly meeting, and we strategize based on the individual volunteer as to what process we'll use to rescue them. That might be someone who we feel is floundering, may not be sending in monthly reports, is making a lot of calls to the office. And so the staff gets together and we come up with a plan that's individualized for that person. An example would be one of our processes is to have that individual, we invite them into the office, or we'll go with them to their facility. And as Marie said, if it's the facility situations, then we offer a reassignment, but are always finding ways to keep a good volunteer that may not just be putting one foot in front of the other, but still has the capacity to be a good volunteer. So it's very personalized to that individual, and it's part of our monthly meetings to do the volunteer rescue. Who out there is floundering? What are the reasons? What can we do to accommodate them? And what is our plan of action for that individual?
Great, thank you.
And Mary, we do a similar process where I would have to say it seems to happen after our training where we're not getting reports, or because we have additional training for the reports. We do not do that part of the 36-hour training. And so we will go out with our volunteer and meet with them on an individual basis and sit down with them and personalize the reports and, try to make it as simplified as we can for them. And we also offer that opportunity that if they are having a difficulty with the role of the ombudsman, one of the coordinators will go out there with them, or they will actually mentor with a coordinator as opposed to another volunteer for as long as they feel as though they need that time.
Right. And how many, Marie, residents do you have in your, I believe you said a 5-county region?
Actually, it's a 6-county region. We have 10,000, I hate to use this term beds, residents. There's 10,657 beds in the 6-county region that we oversee.
And we have, wow.
And that includes skilled nursing, adult care, and enriched.
Right. And we have 20,000 residents in long-term care residing in King County.
Wow, 20,000.
20,000, and it's equally split between what we call adult family homes, nursing homes, and boarding homes or assisted living facilities. So it's a huge job for staff of 7 with 3 being part-time and a cadre of 80 volunteers.
Absolutely.
Do we have any questions?
Yes, we have a question from Sue McKean.
Hi, am I on? Hi,
Yes.
Sue. Hi, how are you?
Good.
Wow, that's great. I guess I have a couple of questions, and I probably should understand this, but I'm not sure. Do you have caseworkers who go out and do the cases, or is it all volunteer caseworkers, or are all the cases done by volunteers?
Are you talking to Mary from Seattle?
Whoever wants to answer the question.
Well, we have the staff goes out. We do casework as well. That's why I'm sitting in my car outside of a facility on my cell phone, because it's when we don't have a volunteer assigned to a facility, of which we have many, then our small staff takes on the complaint work and visitation for that particular facility.
Okay, but your volunteers do the casework in those facilities.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
okay.
They do.
See, we don't do that. So I find this kind of interesting. We have a small staff also, and we have a small casework staff that is regional, and we have actually one and a half. Well, boy, we probably have fewer staff than you do, and this is of course for the whole state. And I've got about 60 volunteers, but really they all do different things. But in general, they're doing resident interviews and some follow-up and monitoring visits, but they are not doing the actual casework. Our case, most of the time, they're not. And sometimes I find that problematic because obviously a lot of people who become ombudsman really want to do some casework. And
we absolutely have a lot of interest in the meaty-gritty part of doing the casework.
Right, exactly.
It's it's where the real work is, and we appreciate, and all of our volunteers do casework as well. Now, they will do that in coordination if they run into snags, because we've got to get it all into NORS. With their assigned, we break our county into 4 subregions, and there's a ombudsman, staff ombudsman assigned to those volunteers. Now, anyone in the office can assist them, but let's say if we have the northern part of Seattle, that ombudsman would be the first go-to person.
Oh, okay.
If the volunteer, and we try not to call them volunteers, but we will for the purposes of today.
Yep.
We consider our volunteers to be ombudsmen.
Right.
And so that's why they do the casework and do the follow-up and, talk to the POAs and the guardians and go to hearings and all of that.
Okay, and confidentiality, and which obviously explains why our training is not as long as your training. Needless to say, I mean, I go over the regulations, but it's really more of a reference for these folks because, while a lot of them resolve a lot of problems, they're not actually doing some of that casework where you sit in on care plan meetings and you're actually resolving some larger issues. And so I see this as a little problematic for me sometimes in retention because, like I said, a lot of people want to do more, just as you mentioned.
Right.
So these were all very interesting things. And I just was curious. Does anybody else work like that as far as...
Sue, our volunteer ombudsmen are very active in cases.
Are they?
And
Okay.
their staff involvement when they get into a situation where they feel uncomfortable, and then staff will certainly help them along the way.
Okay.
But they're very involved.
Okay.
I'm curious as to, so why aren't your ombudsmen involved in cases?
Well, because we have case workers. We have paid case workers.
Paid case workers.
We have paid regional case workers, and we have 2 full-time and 3 part-time. And Maine's a pretty geographically large state, but we cover these regions, and they cover the entire state. Now, our volunteers, we have a lot of volunteers who assist, in the follow-up or maybe in an initial face-to-face interview or in doing monitoring visits of facilities that caseworkers can't get to. But it is a little bit different in how we use our volunteers. We are working a little bit more toward doing more casework for volunteers. But again, I think this has been one problem for me in making this a very exciting volunteer opportunity. If you see my point.
Right.
Yeah. So I just and I don't know if I don't know how all the other states work. Whether most of them work the way you do. I'm sort of
this is Melissa. There is a very wide just distribution on how each state uses volunteers, and they range from a resident visitor to doing ombudsman work, and everything in between.
Yeah. So. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we are working, and of course, let's face it, with budget cuts and so forth, we're going to have to better utilize our volunteers. But this was all very, very good stuff. And I also like the stuff you talked about as far as refresher courses. I mean, I've got some volunteers here who have been with us 12 years.
Right.
And I must admit that we have meetings. We have quarterly meetings. We have 2 conferences. And, we're in touch. But I think we kind of dropped the ball a little bit on you do an awful lot of training. You do more training than I do. Of course, I can see why, because if they're doing cases, that changes things a little bit as far as what
Right.
we're doing. So,
Mary,
anyway.
you're doing much more. Our state requires our program to hold 6 educational in-services per year. And
Yep.
I remember you mentioning that you have 42?
We do 42
Wow.
opportunities. Each of the staff has a monthly meeting in their geographic region, and then we have Saturdays, an afternoon, so some of us have 2, and we take the same topic, and one of us investigates that topic and also goes to the presentation for all of the other meetings during that month that we are assigned to, as well as, conferences, all volunteer meetings. We added it up because we did our 2010 schedule last week, and there were 42 opportunities and our requirement is 9 to stay certified. But we spend a tremendous amount of time doing our in-service and because of the casework that our volunteers do, they need to have an opportunity to brainstorm ideas and get the knowledge from the staff as well as input from other volunteers.
Right.
So volunteers are our job one. We really have made that a priority. And we definitely differentiate between visitation and being an ombudsman.
Yeah.
If someone comes to me when I mentioned earlier that, I really think that retention starts with the screening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I agree with Marie, we redirect when it's my judgment, and we always have 2. I do most of it for the county, and then we bring in a staff person for a half hour, so there's 2 of us sort of getting a read on that individual.
And we do the same thing, Mary. Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you have any kind of copy of some of these screening questions, some of the questions you asked during the initial screening?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I do have. If you'd like to share.
Okay, screening questions, and I'm also developing another one that's just about done that is a self-evaluation that the potential volunteer takes home after the interview, and it really talks about how do you deal with stress, do you take direction well. I mean, those are the ones that are coming because I'm away from my desk. I have about 10 questions. So the person can really reflect upon the orientation and whether or not they have the personality type. And we don't do, are you passive aggressive? Are you this? Are you that? Type A, type B.
Yeah.
But let someone really do a heartfelt self-evaluation at the very get-go, and that's just about complete. And I can finish that up and send it as well, because I think it's going to be a real valuable tool because individuals who come in are putting their best face forward.
Yep.
They're wanting to please. It's feeling like a job interview. And I even walk, my dad taught me to do this. After we're done, I go, that was great. I really appreciate your time. We'll get back to you. And I say, let me walk you down to your car. And it's suddenly like the relief is gone and the pressure is off, and I get a lot of information in that 5-minute walk to the individual's car.
Yeah. And your people are certified, and so what does that actually mean? I mean, I know what certified means, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, we have 32 hours of training, and we have an extensive agenda that we pack into that, and I'm always just so impressed that people can sit through 4 days of training and stay alert. We use the training manual, which in this state is being revised, as a point of reference, but try and make the actual classroom time as adult learning friendly as possible. With interactions, casework, how to introduce yourself, what's your what I call the elevator speech, how do you get out in 30 seconds to a minute what it is and who you are and what you do.
Wow. Holy crap.
So we do a lot of real practical things as well as the traditional training material during our certification training.
Great. I hate to interrupt, but I want to make sure we get to a couple more questions. So
Thank
do
you.
we have
Thank you.
another question?
Our next question is from Debbie Warburton.
Hi, this is Debbie. Hi, Marie.
Hi, Debbie.
I was curious about something that Mary said towards the beginning of the presentation about after your volunteers have been have a leave of absence for 6 months, they have to take the certification training again, and that intrigued me because we have a lot of people, as I'm sure you all do, that they say they're going to be off for a month, and then it turns into 2 months and 6 months. And
I know.
so I like the idea of a cutoff period. But I want to know how do the volunteers receive this information that they're going to have to sit through that whole? And in our case, it would be a 36-hour training again. Is this successful? How is it received? Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's been at first it's shock and dismay, and we find that they come back because they don't want to go through the 4 days again. But I have about 3 folks that are coming back into our next training so that they can resume their duties as ombudsman. And this is an edict that's come down from our state ombudsman. It's not something that we've just decided to do in King County, but throughout the state of Washington, so that we have a process for that 1 month, 2 months, goes on. Now, I'm sure as this goes on, we will make some exceptions, but not very many, because it also forces the person to check in with themselves if they have the commitment, and if they have the commitment, then they will go back through the 4 days of training. So I would say it's going to be successful. We have not pressured any volunteers to take the training. I adopt the attitude, especially during the beginning parts of the interviewing and preparing for the initial training, that I'll make a call, I'll make maybe 2 calls, and then if the person doesn't get back to me, then I write them off.
I completely agree with that, because I think in the past my program has spent a lot of time chasing after these volunteers, and then
Right.
realized that first of all, it's a drain on staff time, and second of all, if they're not going to be responding back to us, they're not going to be good ombudsmen. They're not going to be doing what they need to do as ombudsman either. So
Right. I agree entirely. But so to answer your question, yes, it seems to be a motivation, and it seems to be a successful strategy thus far. We've just implemented it this year, and as I said, we have 3, and if we're only talking about 80 volunteers, 3 is an important number for me, then that's a good sign that it's going to work.
So
I'll know more. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted to follow up. Do you tell the people, when do you tell people that if they're out 6 months, they're going to have to take the training again? Is it when they go on leave of absence, or after they've been gone a month, or because obviously you're not going to just lower the boom at 6 months. You're going to prepare them for this, I'm thinking.
We in the monthly missive that I send out, I'll put in any procedures that we have in place, so that everyone in our volunteer network knows that, and then the staff assigned to that particular ombudsman or myself, that volunteer, we will say, gosh, you're getting close to the end of the 6 months, and then we'll do it on an individual basis. But we don't lower the boom at 6 months. We just say, FYI, when you go on leave, remember that you will need to be recertified. And then someone who hadn't been with us for almost a year did have a real complaint about the retraining, but hasn't signed up for the new one. Somehow being an ombudsman had meant a lot to her in terms of just some sort of status.
I get that too.
You get that too?
Yeah, they don't want to actually go and do the ombudsman work, but they want to be an ombudsman.
And I have that going on a lot more than I'd like to think. In fact, that's why I'm outside of a facility right now getting ready to go in to introduce myself, is that the ombudsman assigned to the facility where we did have to ease out a volunteer because of medical issues, and just say goodbye to him so that they can all have a final goodbye at the resident council meeting, and then introduce me as the staff ombudsman. 'Cause this is a troubled facility that I'm sitting outside in the pouring down rain here in Seattle, Washington.
Bless your heart.
We appreciate you doing that for us, Mary.
Yeah, it's fun.
Thank you for your question. Do we have another question?
Yes, our next question is from Nick Montreal.
Yes, my name is Nick Monreal in Texas, and had a couple of questions, and quite honestly, a bunch of them have been answered, but I've got a question. Does anybody involve their volunteers in family council training?
No. This is Mary from Seattle.
Okay, Mary.
We don't do additional training. By that I mean they do family issues in the NORS in terms of family matters. We talk more about communication skills and dealing with difficult people, but they do get into the fray of family matters as it relates to the welfare of the resident. In fact, we had one yesterday where the POA and his wife had a huge argument, and he was dragging her by the hair out of an adult family home. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a family matter, and I mean that's sort of an extreme example, but that's the one that is comes most immediately to my mind. Are you actually talking about you do specialized training in family counseling for your volunteers?
Yes, we just had a new Senate bill, House bill passed here, and it requires facilities to offer family council training. And honestly, even Nickner has a program that deals with family council training. But that takes me to another question, and that is, do any of your volunteers receive any kind of mental health or behavioral health issue training?
We've done, this is Mary again, we've done, there are mental health ombudsmen in the state of Washington.
Oh, good.
But what we do is look at different topics that the volunteers or that we, pull out of the ether that we think are germane. And we've done a really good set of volunteer meetings on grief counseling and self-care. In almost every topic we use, we try and relate it somehow to a self-care or for the ombudsman volunteer. But it's not something that we do on an ongoing basis.
How about, do any of your volunteers visit some of these intermediate care facilities for mental retardation?
Oh, we do have mental health facilities. Washington is unfortunate in that most of our mental health facilities were closed.
Uh-huh.
And so we have facilities in our county that do house mental health residents that are quite challenging. And we place volunteers very carefully. And typically the staff will take those, but we have a new volunteer with just extensive experience, and she is going to take on some of our mental health facilities. Those are typically boarding home, adult family home settings or boarding home settings,
mm-hmm.
And are very, very challenging facilities. I think they're even more challenging than the work that we do in dementia care units.
No question. Here in Texas, we just passed a new bill on boarding homes, state boarding homes, and we're all preparing for that because it's going to require a different type of advocacy than we've known from the nursing home and assisted living facilities. But look, thank you all very much. I find this very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Sharice Johnson. Hello.
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 Oh, welcome.
Thank you.
Just a real quick question. Mary, I believe you were saying at the or in your presentation about when you have your survey that goes through to your volunteers, and with that, you're able to kind of weed out your more difficult volunteers. Did I understand that correctly?
Are you talking to Mary?
I think so. I think, Mary, I think you were the one who brought that up.
Yeah, we do an extensive screening, and now, are you talking about the questions that we ask in screening?
Well, no, not in the training, but maybe at your 6 month, I'm trying to look for my little thing that I printed off here, at your 6 month checklist that you have of how are things going, or do you feel like you're being treated well, or whatever those questions are, and I can't, I'm like...
Yeah, and I can pull that out. I've got that
the questionnaire
in front of me. And the questionnaire for the 6 month check-in...
yeah, just like, how are your visits going? Now, was that the one you were talking about that you give to the volunteers, and then after that, if you're having difficulties with that particular volunteer, do you sit down and kind of go over this, or what? Maybe I just misunderstood, but I have a couple volunteers who are just a little bit more on the difficult side, and we do an extensive background check, things along those lines, but things do kind of pop up, like the lack of really wanting to participate and do the ombudsman thing, but they're not, they want to go to the meetings that we have, but they're not actually going out volunteering, and they're very content with what they're doing. So, and for us it becomes a time sucker, and we'd like to kind of move them along, but I just want to get a feel for what you do, or Marie, who, either side. I just would like to get more of a clear idea of what you guys do.
Marie, did you want to field this one?
Well, after the 36-hour training, if we find that perhaps a volunteer is not attending the in-services or handing in their reports, we will make contact with them, and we will ask them to come into the office, or we'll meet them, and we'll really try to figure out what's going on.
Okay.
Is this perhaps not the type of volunteer experience that you anticipated? Are you having any problems with your facility? How can we help you make this, the best opportunity that we can for you? And I think opening up the doors of communication is very important.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. We had an individual this year, very interesting. We had 2 people that I really thought were going to be phenomenal ombudsmen. And I think what happened is, honestly, they wanted a job.
Yeah.
And they realized that they were not going to get a job with our program as well as within the lifespan where we're housed, and they moved on. They needed to move on. And so, and we really felt like we screened, the people this year, and we did our best, but I really think that for us this year it was 2 individuals were looking for a job.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, that time spent with trying to figure out how can we make this right for you. Do you feel as though you need more one-on-one training? Do you want, because like I said earlier, we do a mentoring portion. Do you feel as though you need more time to mentor with a volunteer? And so that's really how we pursue that.
Okay.
And that's one thing, this is Mary from Seattle, that I really like that Marie does, is the mentoring piece is something that we don't have, where there's another, I'm assuming, another volunteer that's helping another volunteer as their mentor. And we don't do that. We've been giving it a lot of thought, but we already ask so much of our volunteers, and we cover such a large geographic area that trying to find those people that would be willing to travel, 40 miles to mentor with someone has been our barrier thus far, but it's definitely an idea that we're going to pursue after I talked to Marie yesterday, and then talked to our regional ombudsman about that idea, and it's something we need to implement, because I think it has a great deal of value. We're just going to have to figure out how it will work for us.
And I would imagine that would really empower the volunteer who is doing the mentoring.
Veteran, absolutely.
So,
because we're very selective as far as who we choose.
Right.
Right. And we did one other thing that was very bonding, and we took a community that has 94 adult family homes in it with no volunteers, and we invited volunteers from throughout the county to do an outreach blitz. And we met in the community, and the mayor joined that community, was invited to speak. And we used the senior center in that community as our drop-off point. And a tremendous amount of effort was put out to map quests and give materials. And everyone tag teamed. We set up, and if it was a new volunteer, they were matched with one of the staff volunteers, or a more experienced volunteer was matched with a less experienced volunteer. And in that afternoon, we saw something like 75 of the adult family homes in this community, and the response was terrific. And so in a way, that's a mentoring where we matched people up and sent them out and did one-time visits, because our legislature is saying that we need to reach every adult family home in our community.
That's a great
idea. And with 1,100. So we're going to do this 4 more times in the next year, where we draw people from throughout the county, do different regions, and do this, outreach visits. I call it the outreach blitz. It's sort of like the ATF or whatever they are coming in and deciding to do a siege. And so that's what we did. And it's also a way to recruit for volunteers, because it's a way to get good press.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. All right. Well, thank you so much. That answers a lot for me. So thank you.
Our next question comes from Mark Miller.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And just great information. I want to thank Melissa and the Center for hosting the call. These things are a little dangerous, though. They give state ombudsmen a lot of ideas. We're gonna have to look at that 6-month rule thing. So, I had a question for Mary. I think in your comments you were talking about meeting with volunteers at the end of the year to talk about closing complaints. Is that right?
That is correct.
Talk a little bit more about that process.
What that process is, because our funding depends on cases that we close, not cases that we're working on. Mm-hmm. And we're doing this throughout the year, but at the end of the year, we make a real push to take every volunteer's open cases and work with them to see which ones can be closed out, and if they're open for an extended period of time, why they're still open, and if they're closed, we need to get those into the system, and if there's something that is a barrier to closing that case. But that's what the month of December, November and December is dedicated to, closing cases.
And do you have a policy or standard for how long a case should stay open?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. Our regional ombudsman would. We do a review, I believe, every 2 weeks of our cases, and the state ombudsman wants those closed out by the end of the year. We have so many times where there are multiple issues, and we have to close out individual complaints, but we still have the individual, the resident, in our system as a complainant. So we have to close out every. A case is a person, a complaint is an issue. We work on the complaints, close those out, but we never really close out a case in our definition, because a case is a person. And that person may not have any more issues, but we make sure that every individual issue is covered. But to answer your question, you can check with our, I can get that information to you or give it to Melissa, or you can talk to the Washington State Ombudsman, Louise Ryan, would know that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Because I know that
Marie, excellent job, by the way.
Thank you. Great. Do we have another question?
Once again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1. One moment, please.
Okay. While we're waiting, I have a question that was submitted to me via email. And the question is, do you request information about a volunteer's performance from the staff at a facility?
Well, I have a real strong opinion on that, and it's absolutely not. We're not there at the convenience of the facility. We never ask the facility how the ombudsman is doing. Now, from time to time, a facility will call us and say, we're not happy with an ombudsman, and we will investigate that to see if it's valid. But we usually have a too bad, so sad attitude about that, because it's not our job to be accusing the facility. It's our job to be serving residents.
Great.
Yes, this is Marie. We do not ask residents. However, it's very apparent when we do our evaluations with the ombudsman, the relationships that they've established with the residents. So it's not a matter of asking a question. It becomes very apparent because of the relationships that the volunteers have actually established. It's very evident during that process.
And we have another issue that we run into more, which is ombudsmen that become facility friendly. You know, oh, there's nothing wrong at this facility, oh, they're great, and aren't really digging down, and that's why I'm outside a facility right now. The ombudsman never made any complaints, and then after their last survey, we went, well, we need to do something, because there are, and I've been in twice, and there were a tremendous number of complaints, and that particular ombudsman had only opened 4 in the last 2 years. And so we've really tightened up our procedures. But my concern is more those the ombudsmen that are facility friendly, where they've gotten, where they do go and talk to the administrator, where the perception of the residents is, oh, the ombudsman is in with the administration and not on my side. And that's, we even had an ombudsman last month who was invited to the board of a boarding home. And, we all kind of cheered that she had done that, but then I started reflecting on that thinking, gosh, why, maybe she wasn't doing the job, and then we went in, there were a lot of complaints, and it was something that sort of slipped through our radar.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, we have another question from Debbie Warburton. Your line is now open.
Hi, it's me again. This is a little bit off of our topic of volunteer evaluations, but I just wonder if anybody can share good sources for volunteer recruitment other than the standard, press release in the local newspaper and things like that. Anybody doing anything different to get good volunteers?
Hi, this is Mary, who's obviously talks. We found an incredible resource, and that's Parks and Recreation brochures.
Oh.
I'm very involved in an organization called Next Chapter, which is looking at baby boomers as volunteers as well as social interaction and the different things that affect those of us that are boomers. And that I find that hitting it is a press release, but being permanently in a Parks and Recreation brochure as a volunteer opportunity, just a little tiny thing, has brought us where we're in one of our major communities. We're in the Parks and Recreation brochure, and that's where we recruited 22 volunteers through that effort.
Wow. So that's a brochure about continuing education opportunities, or
no? It's recreation, like lifelong learning. Our Parks Department in Seattle have a subsection of programs for active older adults.
Okay.
And that was a good place because someone who was interested in exercising and was engaged in their community came forward out of these Parks and Recreation brochures. I don't know. It was magic for me, and the press release is, such a drag, and, trying to find a hook, trying to relate it to the community. And whenever I send out a press release, I always mention how many facilities are in that particular community. We pull that up in our database.
Yeah, My feeling about press releases is after a while it's kind of like fishing with a huge net. It's like you pull in a lot of fish, but you also pull in some tin cans and, garbage that you don't want.
Sure.
Some targeted recruitment is what I'm after, and so I think this Parks and Rec idea might have, be something I can use here.
And it's, and I've been given a lot of feedback to do more with faith-based communities that have not been very successful in that area, but really find that we have programs through our senior services and centers, which is one of the nonprofits that has our information referral, and it's a big organization, a big nonprofit. Going through them as well, making sure that they have brochures, and I made a presentation to the staff that answers the calls for all the information that is given to people regarding issues related to elders and vulnerable adults, to their intake staff, much like a crisis clinic staff, but this is a little different, and made a presentation about what it is we really do so that they are referring appropriately, and then put in the volunteer piece as well.
That's a good idea. We have, I'm in New York City, and we have a 311 system where people call and get all kinds of information, and if we could somehow do a presentation for that staff so that they would refer appropriately, that might be good for us.
Yeah, it really worked out. And I'd love to get, and we go to a lot of conferences and do presentations on the Ombudsman program, both as the services that we provide, and there's always a volunteer recruitment packet. But we don't do those tear-off things where, where we paste those all over the place, where you tear off the number if you're interested. That's something that I took away from our program, because it just makes your program look messy with this torn-off little tear-off pieces at the bottom of your brochure. And our state sent out a mass mailing with postcards, and we were very fortunate to have AARP in Washington State, who has their own newsletter. This was a tremendously successful way of getting recruiting, where they did a large article on the Ombudsman program at their request, and sent it out to every AARP member in the state of Washington. Now, they don't do that very often, and it's one of those things that they said, this is a one-time only deal. But that was very good. And also, we use our ombuds, and we encourage them to wear their badges if they're out at the grocery store. And as I mentioned earlier, that everyone has their communication tools in their back pocket, like their, how they can explain what they do. And almost everyone has a story that they want to tell an ombudsman.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
We have another question from Nancy Ferrier. Your line is open.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to respond to Debbie Warburton's question about other sources for recruitment. Hi, Debbie. We met at Nickner, so I'm excited to talk to my faraway friend in New York. One of the things we had some success with recently is, like the last comment just said, is using our volunteers. They're some of our best recruitment sources, and especially when we're trying to target recruit for a particular county, I will put a message out to my volunteers who live in that area and say, are you linked in with any groups where you might be able to spread the word? And one of our volunteers is very active in a pretty large church community, and they had this really neat special request email list, and I just put together a brief announcement about what we were looking for, what the program was all about, and they send it out to a pretty huge group of folks on their email list. And it also says, if this opportunity isn't for you and you know someone who you think might be interested, pass it on to them. And it was actually people from that effort who filled our last volunteer class.
Wow.
And one of the other things we've done is we're lucky enough to have this great in-house graphics department, and they put together a nice recruitment poster for us with a pocket that holds our ombudsman brochures. And we've posted that in senior centers and in libraries where seniors with time on their hands are apt to be going. And we've had some really nice response from that as well.
That's a great idea. We our flyers are in the process of being improved. One of the things that we also do when you're talking about the groups is we use individuals that are in Toastmasters. When we've pulled in several Toastmasters, that's an organization where people gather and practice public speaking. And we've been very successful with Toastmasters, but I am not successful when I go to the service organizations such as Kiwanis or Rotary. I feel like I'm just, taking up a space in their agenda. And so I've cut that out of my off my plate.
Well, we've also had some measure of luck with posting our notices with the social work departments and nursing departments over at the local colleges. And when those folks have to do internship experiences, and some of them have stayed beyond, just the extent of their internship requirement. So that's another possibility. We also do a posting on volunteermatch.org. Do you have that in your area?
Yes, we do.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been using it, though.
Yeah. I get a little bit of success from there. And also I've talked to active senior groups like the Mall Walkers or some other continuing education groups that primarily have active seniors, and they've been fairly receptive.
That's good to know.
So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you for your question. It sounds like our next volunteer call needs to be on recruitment and sharing all of these ideas. So, okay, we have time for one more quick question.
Our next question is from Sue McKean. Your line is open.
You know what? Hi again. My question was sort of answered, and I really don't have anything else to say except thank you very much. We also use AARP. I do want to say that, and they are our major source of recruitment and the best source that we've used. Plus, I just want to throw this out there. I went to a training on this. They're talking about using Facebook. I personally wouldn't want to use that, but I'll just throw that out there for anybody that might be interested in that. Thanks.
Well, it's interesting you'd say that is because our volunteers have wanted to have a Facebook page so that they can communicate amongst themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been a little resistant to that because of confidentiality.
Yep. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But they want a Twitter or whatever that is, and they want a Facebook amongst one another. And I've been putting up some barriers for them on doing that until I find out more about confidentiality on those websites.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I want to remind everyone that I sent out an evaluation with your information about the call, and we use that information to improve the quality of our calls and come up with new topics for both future calls and resources. So please submit that. I also wanted to direct you to the website, www.ltcombudsman.org. And on the website under Ombudsman Support, we have a volunteer coordinator website that has lots of great information. And we have a section called Volunteer Training. And if anybody would like to share any information, agenda, or whatever from your volunteer training, just send it to me and we'll post it. We also have a section for honoring volunteers. So if you have an annual volunteer award dinner or something special for your volunteers, send us pictures and we're happy to post those as well. I'd like to especially thank Mary and Marie for all your hard work and for taking time out of your busy day to help us and present such wonderful information. So thank you both very much. And I'd also like to thank all the volunteer coordinators who spoke with me and shared resources with me as I was researching the call. So thank you all for everything you do. You are wonderful, and the residents so benefit from knowing you and from your assistance. So thank you all again. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. This concludes today's presentation. You may disconnect at this time.